Hey, great times, Mr. Hambley here. Let's talk about cell specialization today. We've been discussing cells and what's inside of a cell. Now we need to start building up from cells into tissues. So today we're going to talk about cell specialization. So why do multicellular organisms have specialized cells? You got about 30 trillion cells in your body. And why do we have specialized cells? So again, not all the cells in an organism perform all the functions a body needs. Cells are specialized. It refers to the fact that not all cells in your body perform the same function. We're going to talk about a few of those specialized cells and what they do in the next slide. So all multicellular organisms are made up of mostly specialized cells. And again, in order to allow the specialized cell to perform specific functions, specialized cells have very specific structure and components within them. They might have different organelles, at least different numbers of those organelles. We'll talk about that in a bit. So a specialized cell performs one primary function instead of doing everything that organism needs to stay alive. It's like having a doctor who's specialized in their type of medicine and comparing it to a construction worker, someone who's very specialized in maybe building certain types of buildings. So they both have different performance things. They both do different jobs, and they are very specialized to do those things. So what's different cells in our body that they specialize in? Regeneration, producing electrical impulses, fighting bacteria in our body, producing energy, moving the body, producing mucus, storing chemical energy, and having easy passage through canals or channels. So regeneration, we're talking about skin cells. Cancer cells are obviously bad cells, but those types of cells would specialize in regeneration. Think about your skin. It sloughs off quite a bit. Cut yourself. You've got dry skin. That's dead skin cells fluffing off. Those skin cells have to regenerate to keep all of your inside parts on the inside. Producing electrical impulses, those are nerve cells. Again, our neurons work by sending electrical impulses that works with our brain, and we're able to kind of sense our environment. Fighting bacteria, we're talking about white blood cells. If you've ever seen that Disney movie Osmosis Jones, he's a white blood cell, and that is what is used in our blood to fight bacteria and invaders into the body that we don't want to be there. Producing energy, we're talking about muscle cells. Again, they'd be high in mitochondria, the energy producing organelles. Moving the body, we're talking about muscle cells as well, but these are specifically muscle fibers. Certain cells are able to shorten and lengthen depending on the instructions that are given to them. Producing mucus, we're talking about intestinal cells. They'll have lots of Golgi bodies in them. Obviously to produce a lot of mucus, keep things moving, keep things digesting in our intestinal digestive tract. Storing chemical energy, we're talking about fat cells. Fat cells are rich in vacuoles. That vacuoles holds that chemical energy in the form of fat. And easy passage through channels or canals, red blood cells. They have red blood cells. We'll talk about these in a couple slides. They have a very smooth exterior to them, and they're able to fit and bend through. Red blood cells, they carry the oxygen in our body, so they're able to, again, get to every single one of those 30 trillion cells in our body. It's quite amazing. So some specialized cells examples. Here's red blood cells for animals. So red blood cells, their primary function is to carry oxygen and carbon dioxide to and from the cells of the body. So oxygen comes in at the alveoli in the lungs. They get pumped back to the heart and then pumped out to the body. They drop the oxygen off at the cell. They pick up the carbon dioxide waste that's produced by the cell, and that's important for the cell to remove that waste. And then the red blood cell carries that carbon dioxide back to the lungs. Well, it goes back to the heart and then goes back to the lungs. It removes that carbon dioxide via diffusion, picks up another oxygen, and the cycle just continues over and over again. So the structure of red blood cells are very specialized. Again, they have a smooth exterior surface for easy passage through the blood vessels and arteries. You can kind of see the artist rendition of them up in the top corner. Kind of look like kind of flattened donuts. The composition, they have this iron compound called hemoglobin inside of them, which is what the oxygen and the carbon dioxide attach themselves to. So again, they're red because of the structures that contain within them. For specialized cells for plants, for example, photosynthetic cells that are found in the leaves of plants. There's kind of a plant diagram up in the top corner there. Again, if you specialize in photosynthesis, you would think that you would have a lot of the organelles that perform photosynthesis. So the primary function of photosynthetic cells in plants is to collect energy from sunlight and make sugar or food for the plants. The structure, the cells are tightly packed together so they can obtain as much sunlight as possible. They're kind of like mini solar cells. They're packed full of chloroplasts. Chloroplasts are the organelle that contains the chlorophyll, which is used in photosynthesis. So photosynthetic cells are very similar to muscle cells. Muscle cells in the body produce energy and use that energy. Photosynthetic cells in a plant, they are actually producing that energy that the plant uses. So how cells become specialized is via this process of cell differentiation. Stem cells are special types of cells that are found in all of our parts of our body that can differentiate into many different types of cells. If you start off, again, we all start off as one single cell. We would all be an embryonic stem cell. An embryonic stem cell can differentiate into any kind of cell that the human body makes. There's huge power in this research. It is slightly controversial because how they get the embryonic stem cells. But again, we all start as one cell. You get a sperm cell from the dad and an egg cell from the mom, and we all start off as one cell, and that one cell multiplies into over the 30 trillion cells that we have in our body. So embryonic stem cells are very powerful in the fact that they can become any sort of cell. In our body, we have adult stem cells. They, again, are in certain spots of our bodies. They're kind of the stem cells that they just differentiate into the specialized cell that are specific to that area of the body. So, for example, our red blood cells, there are adult stem cells that kind of tell cells how to become a red blood cell. And our red blood cells get recycled over time. A red blood cell only has about a 90-day life before it dies. And there's obviously new red blood cells come in to take over. So bone marrow, for example, is where our blood kind of cells start their lives. So that's cell differentiation. How cells build up is the cells form tissues. And then finally, tissues form organs. So there's 4 major types of animal tissues that you need to be aware of. First type is epithelial. You'll see a picture there, an artist rendition on the top, and you can see kind of a microscope vision on the bottom. We'll talk about all these in depth in a sec. Connective tissue, obviously we're talking about bones and blood and things. Muscle tissue, the striations of muscles, and nervous tissue sending impulses around the body. So let's start off with epithelial tissue. So an example of epithelial tissue is our skin. And again, epithelial tissue lines the digestive system as well. They're always thin sheets of tightly packed cells covering surfaces and lining all of our internal organs. The function of epithelial tissue is to protect from dehydration and to give a low friction so that things are able to move around. Okay, so epithelial tissue, quite important. Connective tissue, examples are bone, tendons, and blood. The description is various types of cells and fibers held together by a liquid, solid, or gel, known as a matrix. Again, the function of connective tissue is for support. Again, our bones give us support. Also insulation. You kind of forget that the blood kind of moves around, and that kind of warms and keeps homeostasis in the body kind of at a good point, obviously, for humans. Muscle tissue. It makes bones move. It surrounds the digestive tract. Again, there's some involuntary things going on in your digestive tract. And also your heart is made up of muscle tissue, obviously. So these are bundles of long cells called muscle fibers that contain specialized proteins capable of shortening or contracting the cells. Major function of muscle tissue is obviously movement. Some of these muscle tissue movements are voluntary, but some are involuntary. So some you can control with your brain, others you have no control over, like your heartbeat. So the last one is just nerve tissue. So nerve tissue examples are in your brain, any of your sensory organs. The nervous tissue is a kind of a system of long, thin cells with fine branches at the ends, and they're capable of conducting electrical impulses. So if you touch something and it starts to burn you, that electrical impulse moves super fast from whatever you're touching in your hand, let's say, to your brain and tells your body, hey, you need to react here. So the functions of nervous tissue is sensory, and obviously communication with the body and coordination of all the bodily functions as well. So we've just kind of summarized cell specialization and how those specialized cells, how they're some important ones. Obviously, we just did a couple examples, but how those cells then build into tissues. Okay? All right, that's the end of our chat. Thanks.